Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are talking about Cubs baseball, White Sox baseball. Do we have the worst front office in all of the NFL here in Chicago? And a few tidbits about the Blackhawks. All this and more in this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. So head on over to icehogs.com. I know the season is over, but it's never too late to sign up for season tickets, buy a hat, jersey, shirt, or more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. All right, Alex. Where to begin?
Yeah, it's kind of weird considering a certain baseball team we root for has been, let's just say, kind of a roller coaster this past week of ups and downs. So I guess we start with that.
You might as well start with the Cubs baseball because, I mean, it's probably the biggest of Chicago sports news items, talking topics, etc. So yeah, you're right. It's been, I guess this whole season has kind of been roller coastery, but
Yep.
This week has kind of been especially roller coasty.
Yeah, definitely. Considering the results in certain series and kind of the way things are going for the Cubs, the way they're playing.
Yeah. So last time we talked, the Cubs had started their, what was supposed to be a 10-game homestand, and they had swept Cincinnati. They had split 1-1 with a one rain out with Milwaukee. And then they had the Giants in town, which on paper they should have done very well against, and they did. But, even if you're supposed to beat somebody on paper, once you do it, it's still a good feeling, especially when you've been struggling a little bit. And ultimately, the Cubs took 3 of 4 from the Giants and went 7-2 on this homestand.
Mm-hmm. And that felt really good.
Yeah, that was the good part. I was happy about that. But then they flew to Los Angeles.
And I think they left a lot of their talent back at Wrigley Field when they flew to Los Angeles.
They left a lot of something or other.
Yeah, and now I want to make this clear. I understand the Dodgers are a really hot team, and I understand that their pitching was like their top guys in the series because you had Kershaw, you had Alex Wood, and McCarthy was kind of remade a name for himself with Los Angeles. He's kind of bounced around a little bit. So I give the Dodgers credit for playing well, but a lot of things just didn't go right for the Cubs. And there's one kind of thing I want to address about their offense in a minute. But nevertheless, it was still very frustrating.
Yeah, the wins against the Giants, although they were nice, they weren't the prettiest of wins for the most part.
No, not really.
They got the wins. You saw probably the best start of the season for Lester.
Complete game, 1 run, 4 hits. It was as good as it gets.
Yeah, and it's funny because on the last episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, we talked about how although Lester's numbers were all right, it's the ease of which he was getting through this was not there. It was a lot of grinding and a lot of struggling. And that game, he just kind of breezed through it. It was it was about easy of a start as you can expect a guy to have.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was getting quick, efficient outs while at the same time striking out a lot of guys. I think he had like 10 strikeouts, and he didn't throw 100 pitches. He threw 99 in a game that was like just a few minutes over 2 hours. So it was by far the best start we've seen from a Cub. Probably the second best was that start from Lackey in Colorado, where he really dominated the Rockies, but it was a complete game. The bullpen never even had to move. There was no reason to, because he was just mowing guys down. So yeah, I mean, that was really great to watch.
And even better than the 10 strikeouts was the goose egg on the walks.
Yeah, no walks. And 3 of the 4 hits came in 1 inning.
Yeah, and that was, so it was the Giants never really mounted anything against him.
No.
Whereas most of his starts, even when he's not giving up runs, there's some tough situations that he usually has to get out of.
Definitely.
And was not really the case this game.
Yeah, exactly, because you've seen him work out of a lot of jams this year, especially in like that the first game of the season, really laboring through the first few innings and getting a lot of base runners on, and despite that, still wiggling out of it. But yeah, other than the 5th inning where they got their 1 run, 3 hits, only one of which was hit really hard. The rest of the 8 innings, 1 hit, no walks in the rest of the 8 innings. Like, pretty remarkable.
And that game was nice too, is because you had Johnny Cueto pitching, who, is still a good pitcher, and they got 3 home runs off of him.
Well, and Cueto isn't really pitching to where he normally is. He's struggling a little bit this year, but you've seen his career at Wrigley Field. He dominates at Wrigley Field. I mean, look at last year in the Division Series Game 1. I mean, he really pitched well in that game. He just made 1 mistake to Baez. That was it. So seeing them do that was pretty great.
Yeah, I was actually at a comedy show that night that I bought tickets for. My wife and I were there, and I kept looking down at my phone, watching everything on via Twitter or the MLB app, and when we got out, we got into the car, and Baez hits a home run. I'm like, ah.
Oh, that game was so stressful. And I'm thinking the whole time, this is only game 1 of what's hopefully a long playoff run. And the heart was already beating out of the chest. Because remember, it got kind of dicey in the 9th inning. The wind was blowing in, and that kept Posey from tying the game with a home run. So, yeah, that was something.
Yeah. And then, in that Giants series as well, is you had Hendricks had a nice performance as well, but finally Wade Davis looked mortal in that game, the 5-4 win.
Yeah, I think that was rust more than anything, because he hadn't pitched in like 10 days, so, I'm not really worried about that. I think it was a little rust. What I thought was weird is that the guy who hits a home run off Wade Davis for the first time in like 3 years is Mac Williamson. And I know what you're thinking. Who the heck is Mac Williamson? And yeah, that's kind of what I asked. I'm like, who the heck even is this guy? Like, if it was to come against the Giants, I'd be like, oh, it's probably Posey or Belt or Brandon Crawford. No, it's a guy named Mac Williamson. It's just kind of funny how that works.
Yeah, and I'm not worried at all about Wade Davis. It was just more of a I guess a reminder that he is mortal. that as a human being you're bound to give up a run once in a while. But
yeah, absolutely.
It was just something to take note of, because he's been just absolutely so dominant every time he's come out to pitch.
Dan, you got to give the Mac Williamson guy credit. Like, he fouled off some really tough pitches that a lot of guys strike out on. And the pitch to him that I think he hit out wasn't even that bad of a pitch. He just kind of drove it out. So I guess you just got to tip your cap to him.
Yeah. And then Thursday's game, it's nice to see Eddie Butler put up nice numbers. He got hit, they were hitting the ball hard, but, it was nice to see him get the win.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I know I saw the kind of the replay of that game. Like they have condensed games online, and I rewatched some of the highlights there. Because sometimes you see a game for a second time, you notice different things, and I watched it again because I want to watch Eddie Butler really closely, being a young kid and all. And yeah, he definitely got away with some stuff. But at least as he went on, it seemed like he got a little more efficient because in the first inning, they were just hitting rockets off him. And then as the game kind of went on, it was a little more efficient. So, what that tells me is there's obviously work to do with him, but there's definitely something promising. There's something else I want to talk to you about in that game. Did you see like the beginning of the game when Schwarber took his first at-bat by any chance?
No, I was at work. I just caught replays later.
Okay, they were talking about this also on the radio, and when I saw it, I was just like, wow. Jeff Samardzija was pitching, and when Jeff Samardzija pitches, he's very inconsistent. So sometimes when he's got his splitter going, it's devastating, but when it doesn't, it's 87 and flat. Very hittable. Schwarber got an 87-mile-an-hour splitter that had zero movement on it, and it was right down the heart of the plate. And he swung and just flat missed it. It was a pitch that should have been on the Sheffield rooftops.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about Schwarber, but there's something else going on.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but we'll discuss that in a minute. But yeah, that the Giants series, there was some flaws here and there. It wasn't the best of baseball, but it was. They got the wins, and the Stars came out and hit some home runs. But my big concern was that the Cubs aren't drawing walks like they normally do. I don't know if you've noticed that. The walks aren't there.
Right, and this team is they're like walk masters, and even the beginning of the year when they were inconsistent, they were drawing a heck of a lot of walks. But yeah, they weren't drawing as many walks, and when it comes to the offense, this is the big point I was going to make as you make that point. They're only scoring runs when they're hitting the ball out of the park. They're not driving in runs or scoring in any other way, but driving the ball out of the ballpark, or they're scoring on the other team's errors. But they hit 20 home runs that home stretch, and that's great. But they're only scoring off home runs, and like you said, the walks have been down. Don't get me wrong, it's great to see the exit velocity, like them just crushing the ball, but you can't just rely on home runs. And even Joe Madden said that.
Yeah, especially when, if you're hitting a lot of home runs, you're Toronto or you're Baltimore, and you're hitting a lot of home runs, you have guys on base, so you're just, the runs are coming in bunches. But against Cueto, I believe that was 3 solo home runs, if I remember correctly. So, that's really not that much damage. If you see on a pitcher's stat sheet that he gave up 3 home runs, you should expect that he just got crushed, not down 3-0 or whatever.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because Cueto had some really good moments in that game, but, he gave a few mistakes to some of our top batters, and luckily they made him pay for it. And I think they were mostly solo home runs. One was a 2-run shot. That was Rizzo, but Schwarber, and there was one other person who hit a home run. I think that was a solo. But yeah, a lot of these home runs over that homestand, especially against the Giants, were solo shots.
Yeah, and this is something we've been critical of with the White Sox about, is guys not walking and a lot of solo home runs, and all of their runs are coming on home runs. It was the last game against the Giants, the same thing, is they scored 5 runs on 3 home runs. Jason Hayward, Zobrist, and Bryant all hit home runs, and you still only score 5 runs. Like, that's not good enough.
Right, and look, I'm not trying to, bitch and moan about, they're hitting home runs. I'm not trying to say that. It's great that they're crushing the ball. It's great. But you can't just rely on that. You got to score runs in many different bunches. I think they're still going to come around to that, but you just can't rely on the long ball. And, don't just ask me. Like I said, Joe Madden even said it in a press conference. He says he wants to get a little less home run reliable and do more multiple things across the board. If the manager is saying that, then it's true. They need to kind of spread out that a little more.
Yeah, and that last game against the Giants was another one where they only drew one walk that whole game.
And I believe, no, there was a wild pitch that in an error that scored 2, but all the other runs were solo shots from Zobrist and Bryant, and there was another
Hayward.
one. Hayward, right.
And then, so that was my big flaw that I saw with the series with the Giants is, and I'm not knocking these wins because wins are wins, and when it comes down to it, the playoff, or I mean the regular season is a marathon, and you just need to grind through it and be healthy and ready to go for the playoffs, which are a sprint. So wins are wins, but they left a lot of things that you can improve on that they clearly didn't come this series against the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I really hate saying this. I've always been annoyed when people say this, but I mean, it is kind of more relevant this year so far. Keep that in mind. A lot of time left, but they're not really beating the good teams. They're just kind of beating up on the Reds and the Giants of baseball. I know. It's going to get a lot of flack for saying that, and I've been one to flack those kind of statements, but this year, we cannot deny that the Cubs have not played well against these better teams so far.
Oh, it's absolutely true. It's they're not dominating. They're not beating good teams. Their record overall isn't that great. They're up until a couple days ago they were in first place, but it was first place in a terrible division. I mean, the Central 2 years ago was probably the best division in baseball, and this year it's one of the worst.
It's really amazing because, remember, in 2015, the Cubs were the third best record in baseball. The only teams better were the Pirates and the Cardinals. It was all in that one division right there.
Yeah, it was, the Cubs had the third best record in baseball and got the second wild card spot.
Second wild card spot, winning 97 games, the same amount of games the Cubs won and ran away with in 2008.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things. And this year, that division is not very good, and the Cubs are just middle of the pack. They keep middle of the packing it. They were up by a couple games, and they just can't have any sort of sustained momentum.
Yeah, and it's kind of annoying, but I almost feel like at this point that the division, and other people are saying this too, I mean, it's hard to expect to run away every year, but I do think that this year the division will technically come down to one of the last weeks. And it might be a case where even if the Cubs get really hot and, they win, they have some good streaks here or there, like, okay, let's say for the sake right now, they're a 92-win team. That should still be enough to win this division. I think a lot of the closeness of this division is going to be kind of the parity, and then eventually what our hope is that the Cubs finally just play their full potential and kind of pull away towards the end. But it's not going to be a scenario where, because I mean, it was a perfect scenario for the Cubs last year. A, they were dominating, and B, the division was a huge downgrade from 2015. So the results are a 17-game lead when you win the division. This year, it's going to kind of be, well, it'll be close because there's a lot of mediocrity in this division, and the Cubs have been kind of up and down. And then what I think is eventually going to happen, the Cubs are going to start winning, and then everyone else is just kind of tread water the rest of the way, because we talked about the Brewers last week. We don't think they're going to maintain. The Cardinals, who I still think are the biggest threat, I mean, I watched them this year. They're really not that good, but they are the Cardinals, and they find devil magic ways to do things. But, overall, I don't think it's ever going to turn into a scenario where it comes close to the runaway it was last year for the Cubs.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I disagree with you a little bit. My prediction is I don't think the Cubs will go on this huge winning streak. I think the other teams will go on losing streaks, and the Cubs will just sort of maintain and move ahead by negative actions of other teams. But eventually the same result is I think the Cubs will come out with not nearly as good of a record as the last 2 years, but enough to win this division.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what's happening right now the past week, because when you think about it, the Cardinals have been losing a lot, and the Brewers, ever since that rain delay, yeah, they won today and yesterday, but before that, they had like a 4 or 5 game losing streak. So it's kind of what's been happening right now, and I do agree that kind of thing is probably going to happen maybe over the next few months. But I just feel like that the Cubs are going to really start kicking things towards the end, because, they'll make trades, they'll probably address some things, and, maybe it'll kind of be like 2003 when they were kind of a 500 team throughout the trade deadline, and then they really just kind of got hot at the right time at the end and everything kind of came together. Maybe that's what happens. I don't know. But yeah, I definitely agree that there is going to be a significant stretch where the Cubs are just going to kind of maintain because of the competition in the division.
Yeah, and as it stands right now, is the Cubs are in third, a game and a half behind Milwaukee.
Yeah, I know because the Cardinals have one less loss.
Yeah, so it's just percentage points there.
So, there was a question I wanted to ask you about this series against the Dodgers. Once again, I will say this. All the runs they scored were today. All home runs, driving in those runs. In the first 2 games, 5 total hits, 0 runs. And we're seeing Chase Utley, the corpse of Chase Utley, hammering the ball all over the place. My question for you is, that Dodgers team, are we going to see them again in the LCS or in the playoffs period, and do you think that they are a legit threat?
They're definitely a legit threat. This is a team. This isn't a fluke team. Their general manager, Andrew Friedman, is very, very good. And now that he's got money to play with as well, he's able to do all the things that he couldn't do down in Tampa. And this team has a farm system that they can still make trades, and they've got a good major league roster. They're a legitimate threat. I mean, they very easily could have won the World Series last year, and but it's this year is they're a very good team, and if the Cubs are able to stay healthy, then these two teams are going to collide in the playoffs.
Yeah, because I think with the Dodgers, the main thing with them is they need to have their healthy pitching staff in the postseason. That's an absolute must. And Clayton Kershaw has got to work out some of those postseason demons because, we've seen the difference between playoff Clayton Kershaw and regular season Clayton Kershaw. Now, granted, the Cubs actually did pretty well against them today, but unfortunately the pitching just wasn't there. From the box score that I saw. But yeah, I definitely agree. They are a very good team. They are a big threat. And I feel like every year we're just kind of waiting for them to really break out in the postseason. But even though that's kind of not happened yet, I feel like it's only a matter of time before it does.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be they're in a tough division. The Colorado Rockies are playing very well.
Yes, they are.
They're a very, very good team. I don't think that this is their year where they could go all the way, but they're on the right path. Arizona is playing very well. That's a team that could be scary as well.
Yeah, don't count them out.
No, I'm not. But honestly, I still think that it's going to be between the Dodgers and the Cubs. Washington is a fantastic team, but until they can figure out the back end of that bullpen, I think that's going to become an Achilles heel in a playoff series.
In Washington, I mean, they're going to run away with that division pretty much. That division really isn't any good. They're the only 500 team. They're 8.5 up on Atlanta, and Atlanta's 6 games under 500. And the other thing with Washington is, every year people predict them to run away with the NL pennant, and then they can't even get past the division series. So it's kind of like a believe it when I see it type thing.
Yeah. So I mean, they're like another team in their city. They're like the Capitals.
They're exactly like the Capitals. They have one of the best players. They have a team every year that's predicted to, win it all. And they fizzle out right away. It's really weird how that happens. But yeah, I'd say right now, the biggest threat to the Cubs in the National League would probably be LA.
Yeah, and it's funny because I read a blurb about how that for a long time that Theo Epstein didn't even like to talk to Andrew Friedman. He had to have Jed Hoyer do it until he realized that they got along okay, but he's definitely like a rival. Like he's the one that that Theo feels like he's in competition with.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's almost like you'd picture Theo and he wouldn't be afraid of anyone or have any ill feelings towards anyone. But, I guess there's got to be a rival somewhere.
Yeah, and that's it right there. But these games against the Dodgers, the first 2 games, they score 0 runs in the first 2 games.
Yep.
That's not good. The first game, 2-hitter with 3 walks. That's not getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I really liked in that first game is that they drove up Alex Wood's count really well. And Alex Wood is really pitching well this year, so I got to give him some credit there, but definitely frustrating.
In this 3-game series, the Cubs drew 7 walks total.
Yeah, that's not like them.
No, they scored 4 runs, 7 walks in 3 games. That just... And it's funny, they scored all of the runs off of Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, I mean, how wild is that? It's interesting, though. It is interesting. The Cubs historically have had Clayton Kershaw's number.
Yeah, they really have. But first game of that series is Arrieta gave up... he looked okay. So he gave up 2 home runs to aging guys that he shouldn't have given up to in Utley and Gonzalez. And both of them, if you watch the home run, it was 2 years ago, they would have been out pitches. He clearly was trying to muster up some extra heat and couldn't deliver on it.
Yeah, that game was really frustrating because there were moments in that game where Arrieta looked really good. There were innings where he was getting the movement, painting the corners, locating perfectly, and then he gives up, those 2 bombs, and it's like, well, it didn't really matter in the end because he didn't hit, but still, he was 1 out away from a quality start, and then Gonzalez hit one like 450 feet deep to center field.
Yeah, and then the second game is Lackey just absolutely imploded in that 1 inning.
And again, after starting the game looking real sharp.
Yeah, he was dealing, and I was like, all right. And then, I stepped out out of the room for a few minutes to take care of some stuff around the house, and I walked back in, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, it's just everything, the train fell off the tracks.
Well, I think that's been kind of a problem with Lackey and Arrieta. They can have a groove for a while, and then suddenly they'll just fall apart. Like, remember Edwin Jackson? Like, he was either sucking or he'd be going fine for the first few innings, and then he would just he would drive right off the highway and things would just go straight to hell.
Yeah, it was eerily similar to that. And today, Lester didn't look very good. I understand that the Dodgers team has some guys that can hit, but still, like, he followed up a gem of a performance with an abysmal performance.
Yeah, I know I heard on Twitter, I'd have to see it for myself, that he was really getting squeezed on some ball 3, strike 2 calls. But still, you got to bounce back from those, and unfortunately it didn't happen.
No, and that's a Lester thing, is he gets so emotional. And the strike zone was, I would say it was inconsistent today, but if you're a veteran pitcher of the caliber that John Lester is, you need to adjust in that. Is if you see that it's inconsistent or you see they're not giving you pitches, is you can't test it on out pitches. Like you just can't test the waters at that moment. You need to go with what you know and either let them have weak contact or throw something in the zone with stuff with some sort of stuff on it.
Yeah, and not to mention that this was also against pretty much their B lineup today. Because I saw the lineups, and it was mostly their B guys.
Yeah, it was not a good day. And it wasn't just Lester, too. It was everybody that pitched looked kind of garbage. It was a rough day.
That brings me to another question I have for you. I'm going to say my opinion, and then I'm going to ask for yours. I've been a Hector Rondon apologist for a while, and I think that he's done some really great things. However, I think that the best has been milked out of him. I don't think he's really that good anymore. What's your opinion?
I gave up on him last year with the, when he was struggling with some injuries at the end of the season.
Yeah.
I gave up on him, and I never recovered my my admiration for him. And it's been gone ever since. So the Cubs need to look for new help, because he's just not the answer.
Yeah, and it's funny because when he started the season, like the first maybe 2 weeks, he looked really good. And then kind of ever since that home run to Brett Gardner, just giving up a lot of hard contact. The slider isn't biting. The fastball is hittable, even though the velocity is still pretty good. And the thing is, I say this over and over. We talked about this before. Those kind of relievers who rely on velocity fastball and just the slider like nothing else, they just don't really have a long shelf life.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And his number-wise are not terrible, but it's just when you watch the game and you look at some of the advanced metrics, it just you see where there's problems with Hector Rondon.
And the only thing I saw from today's game when I got home was the home run he gave up to Yasiel Puig. That was an absolute bomb, and the pitch was just right down the middle and flat. It was asking to be crushed, and it was. And I mean, it wasn't just some, high fly ball that just sailed right over the wall. I mean, it was an absolute rocket.
Yeah, I get Yasiel Puig is a talented guy, but he's a guy that if you don't give up mistakes to, I feel like he's not that great of a hitter. He's like what's his name from Major League?
Pedro Serrano.
Yeah, Pedro Serrano. I feel like, if you don't throw something straight down the middle, he's not going to get it. You got to get, you give him some juju or throw it high and inside. He's going to swing, but if you make a mistake pitch, he crushes it. He's got so much power, and it was that was an ugly pitch.
Yeah, and I mean, he's the kind of guy who will punish every single mistake, but you can definitely get around him when you exploit his weaknesses.
Which leads me to a few things here. One is Kyle Schwarber has been announced. It was a couple days after it was publicly stated that they're not going to switch away from Kyle Schwarber at leadoff. They switched away from Kyle Schwarber at leadoff. Then they stated he's not going to start against left-handers indefinitely.
Yeah, I gotta say, I do enjoy Ben Zobrist at the leadoff spot. He's having long at-bats. He's kind of doing a bit more what Dexter Fowler did last year, honestly. So I say they just keep doing that with Ben Zobrist. It's kind of funny with Kyle Schwarber. Everything just seems lost. What to do with him and him himself.
Yeah, it's got to be really frustrating for him and for the coaching staff. But it leads me to think that something else is going on, because you don't go from absolute just 100% no, he's our leadoff hitter, we're sticking with him, to we're not even going to start him against left-handers. That's a big jump to make in like a week.
Yeah, I mean, it almost kind of reminds me of a Bears type thing to do, but yeah, it's pretty dramatic. I mean, yeah, he's batting like 170, and it's really not good, and he's striking out a lot, and you clearly see the frustration, but, I really didn't think this was going to be a problem. I really thought Schwarber was really going to tear it up this year. And he started the first week of the season, he was tearing it up. And then it just kind of fell.
Yeah, I think there's something physically going on. It's either the knee is bothering him, because if you read quotes from all the great hitters, is they talk about how everything is in your legs, and if if anything goes wrong with your lower body, it affects your whole swing. And if he's having issues with the knee, then that could really just throw off everything. That's one possibility. Or he's having some vision problems, which you'd think that those could be correctable, but there has to be something physically going on that he looks like a different guy at the plate.
My kind of theory, and I really don't have any basis, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not him, I'm not in the clubhouse, I'm not part of the coaching staff, I'm not part of the team, but this is just my theory. I think it's a combination of mental and physical. And this is a thought. Playing in the World Series last year maybe affected him physically more than we thought. Now, I will say I'm glad he did play the World Series, because I don't think we would have won without him. But, maybe that does play a factor. And I think, maybe mentally he's really overthinking things now because of it, and that's just making it worse. But there's clearly something not right, no matter what it is, because he's way too talented to be doing this. I mean, you saw him in 2015 when he came up. I mean, he was mashing the ball all over the place. And he still has a pretty good patience at the plate. He's still seeing a lot of pitches, but he's not getting on. That's the thing.
Yeah, and it's the strikeouts are starting to look like rookie year Javi Baez strikeouts, where they just they're bad strikeouts, and he just doesn't look comfortable up there.
Yeah, and the thing with Javier Baez is that we were kind of expecting that right out of the gate, but you could also go down that route and say he's still a youngster. He's still a baby, essentially. It's not like he's a 5-year veteran. He's still really super young.
And then there's a couple more Cubs topics that I want to discuss.
Yeah.
One was Bruce Levine the Scores baseball, Cubs, White Sox baseball guy. He wrote a column about how he thinks Jeff Samardzija is the answer for the Cubs.
I disagree. I know people have been giving me crap, but I disagree. I don't want him back.
I fully agree with you. When I read that he thought that was the answer, I wanted to know what the question was, because it was definitely not the question I was asking. Jeff Samardzija, at one point, I was upset that the Cubs didn't re-sign him, and I thought that they would regret it. And I was horribly wrong in that situation. Horribly wrong. Because he hasn't looked like the same guy since he left. Not with the A's, not with the White Sox, not with the Giants. And he's a guy that's giving up a lot of big innings. And I don't really see any difference between him and Lackey.
Well, here's the thing. His control may be impeccable and he's not walking guys, but if you don't have your pitches going, they're just going to get crushed. And they have. And this is going to get into the topic about my overall thoughts of Jeff Samardzija. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was never really a huge fan of Jeff Samardzija, even when he was a Cub. I thought he was too inconsistent. Oftentimes I asked which Jeff Samardzija is going to show up. I often asked, we're waiting for the consistency to come. I just felt like for years and years we were waiting and waiting and waiting to see Jeff Samardzija finally establish himself. Here's kind of how I remember it. Kind of, on and off, 2008, 2009. 2010, he was terrible. 2011, he was a really good, not really good, but pretty good relief guy. In 2012 was probably one of his best overall seasons, ERA under 4 on a really bad team. In 2013, he was average. And 2014, his first half was incredible, and that brought him that trade value. But I never saw the consistency that we wanted from him, because there were just times he never knew which Samardzija was going to show up. So if we're going to be asking that down in a playoff run, which one's going to show up, is that really someone you want to rely on?
The thing is, if you do bring him over, is you're either going to have to trade somebody for him, or you're going to have to pay the rest of that contract.
It's a big contract.
It's a big contract, and you're only going to go once the playoffs start. You're going with a 4-man rotation, for the most part. Who's he going to replace? So are you going to pay a bunch of money or trade away guys for somebody that's not going to play for the playoffs? I get there's some value in a guy that's going to throw 200 innings every year consistently, but if he's going to have a 4.5 ERA while he's pitching 200 innings, then basically what you have is Edwin Jackson.
Right, and here's the thing. I'm not saying Jeff Samardzija is terrible, because he does have flashes where he's really good, but I just think if the Cubs are going to be looking for a big trade, they can do better than Jeff Samardzija.
Yeah, if you're looking for a guy who has flashes of greatness and then can really implode, why would you have gotten rid of Jason Hamill in the first place?
Right. I know he's not doing great this year, but I definitely see what you're saying.
They're very similar. It's a guy who you can't count on in the playoffs, so you're going to probably leave him off your roster, and one game can look amazing, and another game can just look awful, and Samardzija, with Hamill, you could have had him for just picking up his option of, what was it, 13 million, 14 million, whatever it was. So it's a cheaper option. You didn't have to give anything up, and you're getting the same kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm not really mad at the Cubs for letting him go, but I know what you mean. I really do know what you mean.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad he's gone, because I think you need. I think he was a crutch where they were like, oh, well, he's our 5 guy, but they still, I think they needed to improve, and the one way to do it is jump both feet in and get rid of the guy. But my thing is, if you want to bring in a guy like Samardzija, then why did you leave Hamill go? Because in my eyes, they're a similar guy, and one is a lot cheaper of an option. You don't have to give anybody up for it. But I realistically don't want to see either one of them.
Right, and like I said, another big thing about this is control. If you're going to be looking to get a guy you want to control over the next few years, I don't want it to be a 32-year-old Jeff Samardzija. I'd want it to be someone a little better than that. If you're going to have him around for a while, this isn't some, like, cheap rental we're going after. Like, if Jeff Samardzija was on, like, a really cheap contract and he was doing what he was doing, and we, like, rented him for, like, pretty much nothing, then that would make more sense. But this is something with a guy with a big contract, someone who's inconsistent, and a guy you're looking to control over the next few years. I just think the Cubs can do better.
Absolutely. And honestly, is if it comes down to it and they there's no better option, I would rather them stick with Eddie Butler, because he's at least somebody that's malleable that you can work on. Like Samardzija, he's at that age, kind of like a Jay Cutler, where you know what you're getting, good or bad. You can't work on to improve anything. He's in his mid-30s. He does what he does.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. That's the other thing that was so frustrating about Samardzija was, he showed these flashes of being super good. I mean, his 2014 first half with the Cubs was really, really good. He just didn't get any run support, but he pitched really, really well. But overall, in his years as a Cub, there were a lot of things we were waiting, and there were a lot of second chances with him. And it's like, it got to a point where it's like, you obviously have some talent, but you're not this ace material that we thought you were going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't understand. I mean, I get Bruce Levine's one point is that 200 inning guys are great because they're reliable. You don't have to bring up some minor leaguer to have a spot start here or there, or go to 4-man rotation randomly for a couple weeks, or tax your bullpen, or whatever the case may be. But you're a team that's trying to repeat for the World Series. Is a Band-Aid like Jeff Samardzija is not a good option, I don't think.
Right. Like I said, there's worse out there than Jeff Samardzija, for sure, but there's better. And I think that Theo is going to look over as many options as he can, whether it's guys like Archer, Sonny Gray, or, guys that have control. People bring up Yu Darvish. Well, Yu Darvish's contract is up and he's injury prone, so you'd be taking a lot of risk on a rental, essentially.
Yeah, if you got Yu Darvish pitching well, then that would be a fantastic option. If he pitches like he's capable of pitching, and he's going to be healthy, because he could really alter a playoff run, but you can't guarantee that. You can't even guarantee him being healthy enough to finish the season.
Right. If he didn't have injury problems and he had a few more years of decently priced control, he would be the ideal person to go after, but that's not the case.
And Sonny Gray is going to be an interesting one, because you wonder what the relationship is like after the trade for Samardzija and Hamill for Addison Russell.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the best trades we've seen the Cubs do so far.
That's got to be one of those ones that sticks in your craw. You're like, am I going to give him Sonny Gray now too?
Yeah, right. That doesn't just go away after one season. That sticks in your memory.
I don't know if you have any other topics for the Cubs, but I have one more. So the other day, is Scott Boras in Los Angeles was calling over Chicago media to discuss Jake Arrieta. And he was trying to say that there's no dip in the market value for Jake Arrieta. And he likened him to Max Scherzer, and saying that, he is an elite pitcher still, and he's going to continue to be an elite pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Arrieta's got some good stuff, and he has looked good at times, but he's certainly not pitching like an elite pitcher. He's not.
Yeah, and I think I think part of it was Boris was reacting to a Madden quote about how Jake's got to learn how to pitch differently now that he's lost some velocity. And there's guys, like, you can lose velocity, and you just have to change the way you pitch. If you're a guy that rears back to throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and that's your out pitch, and you've only got a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, it's maybe not going to get it done anymore. It's how you change what you do. And Boris was trying to say that, sure, Arrieta's got a loss of velocity, but so did Scherzer. But Brooks Baseball Analysis looked at the velocity for Max Scherzer's fastball from 2012 through last season. And actually last season, his fastball velocity was higher than it was in 2012.
Yeah.
So he dipped a little bit here and there, but it stayed pretty consistent. It was based 94.97, 94.46, 93.88, 94.57, and 95.23. That's pretty consistent.
It is, and he's also the kind of guy who's been a proven bona fide ace for much longer in his career than Arrieta was.
Yeah, and again, if Jake Arrieta leans on some of his, what he did in the Cy Young run, the second half of that season, where he hits the corners and then throw some nasty stuff for out pitch, then sure, he can do that, but he's got to understand that if he thinks he's going to rear back and throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, I think Chase Utley catching that ball and crushing it should remind him that that's not the case anymore.
Right, yeah, he's not going to get away with that kind of thing like he was before, where the velocity could overpower someone, because we saw in his Cy Young year, he was doing so many different things with different pitches. He had a slider that would wipe you out, he had a cutter that would saw you off, and he had a fastball he could blow by you with some good movement. And if the velocity's not quite there, you can't get away with as many mistakes as you could before.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Hendricks gets away with 88-mile-an-hour fastballs. Greg Maddux got away with 88-mile-an-hour fastballs. 93-mile-an-hour fastballs is nothing to scoff at. It's just you can't throw it with nothing on it, or when people are sitting on it.
Right, or in a bad spot, where Kyle Hendricks and Greg Maddux, they located those pitches in the right spots. That's kind of why they would get away with stuff like that, because they were kind of playing mental and location games with the batter, where if you're sitting on an Arrieta fastball and he doesn't throw it where he wants to and it's right over the heart of the plate, then yeah, it's going to get hit most of the time.
Yeah, so if Arrieta wants to continue the narrative that he's a guy that can continue to be a good pitcher, then he needs to show that he's able to do those things with a reduced velocity.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about Cubs-wise.
Well, the last thing I'm going to say about the Cubs is I'm going to be legit upset. I've been trying to look at this series rationally, but I'm going to say it, and I might sound kind of meatball-y, but they have no reason to not destroy the San Diego Padres the next 3 games. There's no excuse not to destroy that team. Have you seen that team? Have you seen that roster? They better destroy them.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But that park is nice.
Yeah.
The park is really nice. I've been there.
Yeah, the area is nice.
Yeah, I've been there a bunch of times, and they've got that. Well, I guess the Cubs now have that too, but there's like that little park that's right in the outfield where the Tony Gwynn statue is. And it's a nice park, and even if your baseball team is bad, there's nothing wrong with sitting out there in 70-degree weather, enjoying sitting there. But still, the Cubs absolutely should manhandle the Padres, and fingers crossed that they actually do.
Yeah, no kidding.
White Sox, we can, I guess, transition right over to them. Carlos Rodon is finally getting close to pitching. He's, a week into the season is we heard reports, he's really close, he's day to day, and it's coming up on, this is the last few days of May, and we still haven't seen him in a game.
Right, he has even pitched in a rehab start. I feel like the most he's done is maybe a simulated game. I don't know if he's even done that.
No,
I know he's been throwing, but
he's throwing off a mound. That's I think that's the extent of it.
Okay.
But so I'd say that's a very Bears-like situation.
It really is.
That's Bears and Kevin White. You wonder, he's a guy who's a young kid with just absolutely incredible stuff. I mean, stuff-wise, he better stuff than Chris Sale, I would say. It's just his control is not there, and he gets, a little erratic. If that kid can figure out his command issues, I mean, he could just be dominant.
He'll be incredible, yeah. That slider.
So to him to be struggling to get on the field is got to be a real setback for the White Sox organization.
Yeah, and it's probably frustrating for a lot of the fans too, because he's one of the big bright spots of the future. Now they keep adding more bright spots because we talked about Luis Roberts and he finally signed the deal, so he's officially a White Sox now. You got him, you got Moncada, you got Dane Dunning, you got Michael Kopech, and Rodon's kind of the one that's been around for a few years, but is still part of your future because he still is really young, and you've seen flashes of how good he can be. He's just got to work through some of the injuries and some of the control bugs, but the potential is just, it's so there. We all see it.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they rushed him up to the bigs too fast.
That's kind of what I've been saying. That's kind of been, because I was surprised how fast they rushed him to the big leagues. I thought they were going to keep him down for like another year before they brought him up, but they brought him up pretty fast.
Yeah, I thought they were going to do what the plan was for Chris Sale, is bring him up slow and put him in the bullpen and then transition him over. And no, they just really went quickly. And
they just threw him to the wolves.
Yeah, and I get there's merit to, if you're a team that's not doing well, is let people struggle at the bigs because those are the guys you're going to face anyway. But at least in the minors, is you're not doing it in front of so many people, and you can take a lot of the mental aspects out of it because it's smaller audiences and more instructional as far as the games. But I mean, that was a White Sox organizational strategy, and so far it has not been super kind to Rodon.
And that's kind of what they're trying to change with their next wave of guys. They're trying to take their time and not rush guys up to the big leagues so fast.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that you have to watch for. Are they going to take their time, or hopefully that's the case, because there's no sense in rushing anything.
No, there's no reason to.
Yeah. But this week, the White Sox had two series, one against the finished one up against the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they had another one that they completed with the Tigers. The Arizona one was absolutely a case of they finally faced a legitimate team and just got manhandled.
Well, and the Diamondbacks are doing it what they were supposed to do last year, and that's be really good.
Yeah, and they just came and just manhandled the White Sox, swept them, and just looked really good while they were doing it. It looked like a complete baseball team.
Yeah, exactly. The pitching was good, their hitting was good, their defense was good. It was all there.
But then, they had their series with the Tigers, which was basically a lot of rain delays, a lot of waiting and makeup games, but ultimately the White Sox took 3 out of 4 of that series.
Yeah, and the Tigers are complete trash right now, to say it nicely. But yeah, I mean, they pitched really well. They hit pretty well. They did much more right in this series than they did against Arizona. The Tigers, boy, whew, bad, very bad.
Yeah, and it's funny because on Friday they were supposed to have a doubleheader, and the first game got rained out. Then the second game started like 90 minutes late. So
Yep.
I think it started
Maybe a little more.
I think it started almost 9:00.
Yeah.
And I was laughing. So I was telling my wife about the Brewers GM, and I was like, I wonder if he's complaining about this game.
Yeah, exactly.
If he's the rain delay police. But Mike Pelfrey came out for the White Sox and was dominant. So that should just tell you.
Mike Pelfrey.
That should just tell you something about how bad the Tigers are playing.
Well, if you look at their lineup, it's garbage. Like, it's really bad.
Yeah,
old and slow.
Yeah, the White Sox had dominant pitching performances by Holland, Pelfrey, Danish. It was just like this was a get right series for the White Sox.
Yeah, even though, what's so funny about the Sox? They're a rebuilding team. It's year one of a rebuild. You expect a year one rebuild team to be really bad. And it's almost like with the White Sox, just when you think they're finally going to get really bad, then they go out and win a series like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's nice that they had a shot in the arm by signing Louis Bobby from Cuba. But he's a couple years away. Most of your guys are just a couple years away, and you would think you'd want to just really tank to pad these draft picks and really stockpile them. Because even if they've got so many guys now, even if half of them hit, which is still a good percentage, you're going to need a few more guys, and the White Sox are never going to go out with this huge payroll. So you still need these draft picks as trade collateral to bring somebody else in if necessary.
Yeah, this is a team that I think if I were a White Sox fan, like a diehard White Sox fan, this is the year I'd say I'm just going to kind of step back and hope you absolutely suck. Like, this is a year it's really hard to root against your team. I get that. It was hard rooting against the Cubs in 2012, but that first year rebuild, that's just 1 year you got to understand that you just got to suck. Like, you got to be really bad. And the Sox really haven't been bad this year. Yeah, they're not 500, but even in the games they're losing, they're right there in those games. They're not getting blown out for the most part.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I would love to candidly sit with Rick Hahn over a drink and when he's being honest with you and get his opinion on if he's happy with the White Sox treading water right now and just muddling around the middle of the pack rather than being right at the bottom.
I think what might be frustrating, and I say this mostly jokingly, that he has to keep Kenny Williams tied because that Kenny Williams would be looking at this scenario where they're playing competitive baseball and already envisioning trading for aging veterans to try to boost them to a playoff run this year. Like, I say that half jokingly, but I can't help but wonder if people like Jerry Reinsdorf watch this team be slightly competitive and think, we're competitive after trading some of our assets. If we had the assets we had last year, maybe we'd actually be in the thick of this. Like, I can't help but wonder if he thinks that. Reinsdorf, not Hahn.
Yeah, they might, but honestly, is trading Chris Sale was addition by subtraction.
Yeah, it had to be done.
It was the absolute right decision. You were never going to win with him. You weren't. Trade him away, and you got an absolute haul for him.
Same with Adam Eaton.
Yeah, that was just a no-brainer trade right there. But it's you got to feel like if Rick Hahn absolutely has a fire sale at the trade deadline and is giving players away, Todd Frazier for a bag of balls and Melky Cabrera for a bag of tacos, like then he's really trying to tank. But
right.
if those guys are still here after the trade deadline, anything that's not nailed down is, if you're not at least hearing lots of rumors about attempted trades or whatever, or traded in period, then you got to feel like that he's got some other strategy in mind. But if he's actively trying to trade all these guys and or actually trades them, then he's really going to try to suck in the second half to get that better draft pick.
Yeah, and it's coming to a point where guys like Frazier and Cabrera, like those kind of guys, and Derek Holland, like they're the last year or their only year of their contract. So don't try to be like, yeah, we want to hang on to them and, maybe their value will be better. It's like, no, you're not gonna do that. Sure, their contracts are up. Just no matter what their value is and no matter what you get in return, just trade them away. Because if you don't, Frazier and Melky are going to go elsewhere and you're going to get nothing. So it's better to get something, even if it's very little, than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, just think of how many throw-in guys in trades end up being quality players. If you get some low-level prospect for any of them, you're in a better situation anyway, because you're going to suck and you're going to end up getting a better draft pick, and you've got more in your farm system than you did, the day before. It's not like Todd Frazier and Melky Cabrera are putting butts in the seats. It's not like everybody's rushing out to get a Todd Frazier jersey.
No, absolutely not. I mean, look, if you trade Todd Frazier and you literally get like cash and a no-name A player, then at least you got something. Because if you don't, Todd Frazier is going to be gone, and pretty much getting him was all for naught. Same with Melky Cabrera. Melky Cabrera, you might be able to get a decent throw-in that turns out okay. Maybe if it's even a bullpen piece, like when we got like Justin Grimm from, the Rangers. Stuff like that. That all counts. And either way, it's better than what you had. Because then you could say, well, Cabrera was here for 3 years, never dealt him, he went elsewhere, didn't do what we expected. You'd rather see some sort of return for that if it means better for the future.
Yeah, and plus you're not paying the salaries for these guys for the rest of the year.
Exactly.
So I don't know. It's got to be. I mean, if you think about it, if you trade Holland, you trade Gonzalez, you trade Cabrera, you trade Frazier, you trade Robertson, is all those guys. Even if you get one minor leaguer for all those guys, say one of them hits, 1 out of 5, then not even a superstar, you get a decent guy who's salary controlled, you got to consider that a win.
And what are you going to say if it doesn't work out? Oh, we could have had Todd Frazier for 2 more months on a team that wasn't competing. It's like, you can't really
we could have finished the
lose.
win with 3 more wins that would have still not got us into the playoffs.
Yeah, and would have hurt our draft stock. So either way, that's the one thing. Like, they're obviously rebuilding, and I think the Louis Roberts sign kind of sealed the deal that they truly are looking for the future. But what's just kind of funny with me now is there's absolutely no rumors I'm hearing about any White Sox trades. The closest I've heard is the Red Sox were scouting Quintana and Frazier. That's literally all I've heard. There's like no legit talks or rumors. Maybe there are behind closed doors and we're not just hearing about it. But it seems like no one is talking about potential White Sox trades right now for any player other than Quintana.
Yeah, it's still early. It's still really early to talk about anybody. I mean,
but I just feel like there'd be a little more.
Yeah, I mean, right? Nobody really starts talking trades until a month from now, and then you're gonna start seeing things heat up, and I'm sure the White Sox, if they can get a I mean, if the White Sox got a halfway decent offer now, I'm sure they would jump at it because, they're holding out these veterans for value with a shoestring. I mean, Holland, every time he has a bad start, that's got to leave at least one potential suitor going, oh, is this really the guy we want to go for?
Right. And, Holland right now, he might have some of the best trade value on the team right now.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, still think Robertson, but Holland is a starter who's pitched halfway decent this year. Somebody's going to pony up something for him.
Yeah, because here's the way I see it. Your most valuable asset's Quintana, no doubt. He's not really pitching that great, but we know overall he's still really good. So I don't think his value is that much hurt. Then I think Derek Holland, because he's a cheap, easy guy you could rent. And then there's David Robertson. You need a closer. Melky Cabrera might have some value. Right now, I'll be honest, I really don't think Todd Frazier has much value, but, you could get something out of him. And those are really kind of the guys that people are talking about involved in trades that people are kind of speculating. They're like, okay, and this is just fans talking, like no media, but fans are like, okay, I see these guys being traded. No one's really talking about Jose Abreu being traded because I think he does stick around a little longer. And if they kept him around, that's one thing I could see them doing for a good reason.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think he was a huge factor in them being able to sign Luis Robert.
I think he's one of the biggest factors.
Yeah, because the Cardinals apparently offered more money, but he felt more comfortable coming with the White Sox.
And the White Sox have such a good track record of dealing and having and growing Cubans and being active in the Cuban community. It's for a Cuban player, the White Sox are a really must look because of their positivity they've experienced with Cuban players and their interactions. They have a really good history with that.
Yeah, I mean, not even just a recent history, but a long-standing history. So it's
go back 50 years.
Yeah. So it's one of those things as I would be now. I'm starting to at the beginning of the season. I was like, oh, you gotta trade that guy, but I don't know what the market is for him, and at that point I would just keep him.
I would too.
He's a good guy in the clubhouse. There's never anything bad said about him. I mean, I know Todd Frazier is as well, but I think Todd Frazier buoys your team a little bit. I think he's been a little more. I bet he's won them a few more games than.
Frazier really has no purpose on the White Sox anymore. He was brought in last year to try to be an additional power and defensive guy at third, to try to contend again and be a positive force in the clubhouse going forward on a contending team. Now that they're rebuilding and getting younger and they're kind of embracing a culture that's a little different, that's more fit with, like, say, Abreu. Like, I just don't think Todd Frazier really has any purpose on the White Sox anymore.
None whatsoever. So I just look for him, even if they have to package him in with Quintana and say, like, all right, well, if you want Quintana, you got to give us this, and this, and you have to take Todd Frazier.
If you get a great deal in return, you absolutely do that.
So we shall see. There's a little bit of Blackhawks. I mean, none of this is too new, but Michael Kempney was re-signed on a 1-year deal, and Richard Panik was signed to a 2-year extension. So the Blackhawks are trying to lock up some of the younger guys, which leaves me wondering is who's going to be gone to make room financially for this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trade rumors about, like, Seabrook, so I don't really know who's going to take that kind of thing on. There's obviously something has to be done, and right now to me it's just not very clear.
Yeah, and we have the expansion draft coming up pretty quick. So that's going to be interesting to see who we lose. We've already lost Scott Darling and traded him away and I know a lot of people were really upset by that, but we weren't going to be able to re-sign him. He was a restricted free agent. So we basically traded a guy that wasn't under contract and got something for him. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. That's kind of another area I'm questioning about a lot right now is goaltending. Who's going to be the backup?
I don't know.
Glass really isn't very good. Matt Carruth isn't any good. There's really no one in the system that you could bring. I mean, are we just going to probably sign some aging veteran that's available to a 1-year deal? I mean, who's even available on the free agent market?
I mean, is Cristobal Huet still available?
He was available maybe 7 years ago.
There's just I don't know. Are they get maybe they go out and sign a young foreign somebody playing in a foreign league, because they've been looking hot and heavy with some defensemen in some of the European leagues. So maybe they'll do something like that with goaltending as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know where else they can go. I really don't.
It's going to be interesting, and I know it's when I don't always agree with the plan, with the plan of action, but you can't deny that Scotty Bowman, that he at least has a plan. He has an idea of what he wants to do, and he doesn't do everything just willy-nilly. So makes you feel at least better that he understands where the reality is for the Blackhawks and what they need to do, and he's things are in motion to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of one of the things where you trusted him to have an idea and a plan in kind of retooling what's already a successful core. It's just there's a lot of factors that are involved that don't make it very straightforward or easy, whether it's the cap, whether it's the contracts, whether it's who's available. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
And I want to correct myself. I think I said Scott Bowman. I meant Stan Bowman, but
we know what you mean.
Yeah, so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens, because there's some financial issues, and I've heard a lot of the well-respected Blackhawks bloggers trying to talk to the regular common fans about how there's a difference between, specifically speaking about Brent Seabrook, a bad player and a bad contract. And just because you have a bad contract doesn't mean you're a bad player. I know Seabrook has had ups and downs over the last couple seasons, but if you had him for half that price, you wouldn't even be considering getting rid of him. But the big part of why you want to get rid of him is the amount of money he makes.
Right, that's kind of the killer right there. I mean, he's clearly declining, he's clearly getting older, and he's making all that money.
Yep, absolutely. Couple more Blackhawks things is, it's been a couple weeks now since Mike Kitchen was fired, and the rumor mill is that they are zeroing in on a replacement in Ulf Samuelsson, who is a guy I remember watching as a kid play, and he actually played with Coach Quenneville on the Hartford Whalers for a couple of seasons.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into the coaching much lately, but I feel like if you have a strong connection with Q, that's only going to spell good things for you.
Yeah, and he was a defenseman. He was a good player. He did some assistant stints with the Coyotes and the Rangers, and he's currently coaching in the AHL for the Checkers. So he's got some coaching experience. He's got ties with Quenneville. He was a solid defenseman in the league. I remember him mostly from playing for Hartford, but he's much more fiery than Kitchen. So it'll be interesting.
Maybe that'll help. Maybe.
Yeah. And he did win the Stanley Cup with the Penguins twice.
In the 90s?
in the 90s, 91, 92.
Yeah. One was against the Hawks.
Yeah. So Blackhawks fans, depending on how old you are, may remember that. And
Right
also,
before my time.
the Blackhawks they fired Ted Dent several weeks ago, and they replaced him with Jeremy Culleton, who, it's funny, he's many years younger than I am. He's 32 years old. He's replacing Ted Dent, and he's a guy that's not very far removed from his playing career. He retired from professional hockey in 2014.
Wow, that's really close.
So he's a guy who's I have a feeling that their thinking is he can actually relate to the players much better because he's closer in age, and he had a fairly long career in professional hockey. He spent the last 4 seasons playing in Sweden, and he ended up being the coach of a Swedish team. But he played 8 seasons of professional hockey, and when he came out in his presser, he said all of the right things. It's, hey, I know my job first and foremost is to develop these players to play for the Blackhawks.
And that's probably really attractive to the Blackhawks front office right there.
And I think part of the frustration with Ted Dent is a good coach. I think Ted Dent, I've talked to Ted Dent. I've interviewed Ted Dent. I think Ted Dent's first priority in his mind was to win games in Rockford.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think some of the frustrations of players being ready to come up and play consistently in Chicago from Rockford, I think some of those frustrations where they were not able to spilled over, and then the nail in the coffin was that they felt his priorities were not there because Jeremy Culleton basically came out and said, "This is my priority. After that, I want to win games in Rockford."
And I get both perspectives. I get it, but
absolutely.
At the end, you got to do what's important for the organization.
Yeah, the one that signs your paychecks is, it's not like the Rockford Ice Hogs are paying Ted Dent's salary. It's the Blackhawks are, so you need to be beholden to what they want you to do. And I know it's kind of a vanity thing because when you're a minor league, any sport, and a minor league coach or manager, your ultimate goal isn't to win the games there per se. It's like a secondary thing. It's to prepare players for the future in the big league team, and that's not always an ego stroker.
Right.
It's got to be a hard pill to swallow, knowing that it might not look good on you if you're losing night in, night out, but if those players are making that leap and looking good, then you're doing your job. So I think his balance wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
So, we shall see. And one last thing is, I have a question for you. It was something I've been thinking about the last few days. It's the way Nashville built that defense, which is going to be put together for the next several years.
Yep.
Do you think that essentially shrinks the Blackhawks any chance they have of keeping this window open?
I think it makes it more difficult. I really do. I don't think it completely eliminates it because of how talented the Hawks are. And if they make the right adjustments, I think they still have a chance to exploit any possible weaknesses, even if there aren't many. But I do think it makes it really hard on the Blackhawks with the way that team is built. And it's not like it's going to be a one-year fluke team. They're going to be around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, if their goalie plays, Pekka Rinne plays well, I think it makes it really, really difficult for the Blackhawks to compete with them. But the good news is he's been quite inconsistent over the years.
Right.
Some games some seasons he's dominant, and then there's other big chunks of time where he looks average at best. And if you catch him in those moments of looking averages, think about how many great shots the Blackhawks had against them that he just stopped, and that could have really swung the momentum.
Sure.
So, yeah, I agree that the window is not slammed shut, but it's got to be, even when the other teams in this division looked good, between the Wild and the Blues and whatever, it's always been the Blackhawks were the big brother, and I think this is the first time in the last however many years where the Blackhawks are the ones going, oh wow, we're the underdog now.
Yeah, because, for many years we've had some really good teams in our division, like the 14 Blues and the Wild the past few years, where they tried to intimidate us, but we weren't intimidated. We knew in the end we could beat them, and for a while we did. But this time, yeah, you're definitely right. It is different.
So yeah, it's gonna be one of those things that's interesting to see how they reconstruct this team, considering that the Predators are in their division. And the Predators, by the way, are already doing their shenanigans. Nobody with a Pennsylvania billing address is allowed to buy tickets for their games.
Yeah, I think that's weak, but
I know a lot of, from my time living in Pennsylvania, I know a lot of people that are Penguins fans, and they're like, what the heck is this? And I was like, I'm a Blackhawks fan. They do this every year to us. And I was like, you'll find loopholes. You'll find ways to do it.
I just think it's extremely childish. I get you don't want your fan base, being outrunning your own building. I get that, but come on.
Yeah, as a guy I know who's a diehard Penguins fan, he was like, he was making fun of another team's fan, maybe the Senators fan base, and I was like, listen. I was like, be prepared, because the Nashville fans do the wave. And he's like, oh crap. I was like, you're gonna see some amateur stuff.
Yeah. Oh well.
But tomorrow starts that series, and I think it'll be a good series.
I think it will be too, but honestly, I'm really not, I just, I don't want to watch it. I will end up watching it, but I really don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to watch it because I think it'll be really fantastic hockey. I think these playoffs, barring my personal feelings as a Blackhawks fan, have been really good.
Oh, sure.
And they've just absolutely, even more so considering how bad the NBA playoffs have been.
Oh, those have been brutal. Boring, not fun, not exciting.
But the last team I could consider rooting for is out in the Senators. Lost in the double overtime. It's Game 7.
Yep.
Which was a classic game. So now I'm just like, I don't like either team, so I don't want anybody to win, but it's going to be good hockey. I think it'll be nice to sit down and just put my feet up and not have heart palpitations watching a Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely hear you. It was good for our Chicago Hearts after what we had to go through in October. So
I guess that's going to move us to the last thing I had to talk about was I have two Bears topics. The first one is a writer for CBS Sports. I don't even want to say his name because I'm a little bit annoyed by this, but he named the Chicago Bears as the worst front office in the NFL.
I don't think that's right.
And one of his reasons was that the Bears bid against themselves for to trade up for Mitch Trubisky.
Look, it's a controversial move, but we haven't seen what Trubisky's done yet.
giving up like 2 mid-round picks for a guy that you think is a special talent at quarterback, I don't understand that big of a deal. It's not like, 2 mid-round picks are slam dunk Hall of Famers anyway. And it's even more frustrating is I don't even understand what bidding against yourself means. Because think about it, is the Bears call up the 49ers and say, hey, we want to move up. And the 49ers say, all right, well, what do you want to give us? We'll swap our first round picks and we give you a third round pick. And they're like, no. Okay, how about if we add a fourth rounder next year? All right, that works. It's not, how are you bidding against yourself? It's you make an offer to the 49ers. They say no. You sweeten it a little bit, and then they accept. It's not really like you're bidding against yourself. It's the 49ers are a team that has something that the Bears want, and the Bears have to give them enough for them to give it up.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and you make a good point.
Yeah, so I don't just see how it's bidding against yourself. It's not like that makes it sound like the 49ers were like, you know what, we'll just call it even Stevens by swapping first round picks, and the Bears are like, no. We insist you take these. And in fact,
yeah, that's not really what happened.
That's not what happens, and that's a little bit silly. And it's more frustrating because this same writer gave the Chiefs a B+ in their draft grade for trading away this year and next year's draft for Pat Mahomes. So
yeah,
the Bears gave up 2 mid-round picks for the quarterback they felt was the best, and the Chiefs trade all the way up and bypass the media darling quarterback in Deshaun Watson to take Pat Mahomes, and they trade a lot to get him. So that's weirdly doesn't make any sense to me. And sorry, go ahead.
I'm not saying the Bears are, they're these geniuses, they're the greatest, blah, blah, blah. They're certainly not the best, but I don't think it's right to call them the worst.
Yeah, it's even more frustrating is because the same writer also said just before the draft that the Cleveland Browns were talking with 8 different teams about moving up from number 12 to take a quarterback. So if the Bears identified Mitchell Trubisky as their guy, how can you criticize the Bears for moving up one spot to get him when you also reported that the team that has a lot of trade capital is trying to move up to get him?
Right.
So clearly, I mean, and Ryan Pace didn't specifically say the Cleveland Browns, but he noted that what made them decide to move up is that they were called and inquired about to trade into that number 3 spot to draft Mitchell Trubisky. So they were like, well, crap, we know we want this guy, so we're going to have to move up to guarantee we get him. Like, I don't see how that's the stupidest thing ever. That doesn't really make any sense to me.
Right. Yeah, no. I mean, and again, we haven't seen what Trubisky's done, so I just think it's too early to really call them the worst for doing that. Again, say what you will about it. At first, I was really boggled and upset with it, but, we just got to see how it plays out at this point,
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
If the Bears, all of their scouts and everybody involved in making this pick, they were all on the same page. And if they turn out to be right, then yeah, this was awesome. But if he turns out to be an absolute bust, then of course they're all going to look dumb. But we don't know.
Right.
The guy's never taken a snap in the NFL. We don't know. But it's the same writer who's criticizing and did those other things also is the same writer who wrote right before the draft also about how John Gruden's biggest regret was not drafting Aaron Rodgers. So, if this guy were to go back and reread things he wrote in April, he would see he would understand why Ryan Pace is making these trades. is he didn't want to regret missing out on drafting Mitch Trubisky. He felt that confident. He knew that the Browns were trying to move up to trade him, so he moved up to the one spot that would guarantee he could get him. And the same guy was praising another team for moving, giving up their farm next year to draft a guy later in the draft that, was, up until, media was saying was a second round pick. So, so are the Bears, do they have the best front office? No, but they've made some really great moves over the last few seasons.
And there's still a lot to be determined on how it's going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, they've made some decent free agent moves with Akeem Hicks, Jarrell Freeman. Their undrafted signing of Cameron Meredith has got to be considered a win. You have the Jordan Howard draft pick, the Cody Whitehair draft pick, the Eddie Goldman draft pick. I think they've done plenty enough to say that they're far from the worst.
After weeding out a lot of Phil Emery crap.
Yeah. I mean, what has Cleveland proven? What is, I mean,
right.
Jacksonville is getting there, but what, up until this past year or so, what have they proven?
Right. Exactly.
So I just don't understand how they can say he's the worst. There's a little bit of a pet peeve, frustration on my part.
Yeah.
And then one last thing I wanted to talk about is the Bears. I don't know why it's getting a lot of buzz, but the Bears signed Victor Cruz to a 1-year contract this week. And the reason I'm just not even excited for it is I don't even know if he makes the 53-man roster when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, all I see him is a veteran stopgap. That's really all I see it as. He's not the Pro Bowler he was in 2012. He's not that same player. He's had a lot of injury problems. You could say 30's young, but in the NFL, it's a bit different. He's going to be in a new system if he plays. And, maybe he plays and maybe he puts up some respectable numbers, but I'm not expecting him to put them over the top and for him to put up Pro Bowl numbers like he did a few years ago. It's really just a veteran stopgap move.
Yeah, and that's if he makes the squad. As of right now, they have 12 with him. They have 12 wide receivers under contract, and I expect them to carry 6. So 6 guys got to get cut. Kevin White's going to be on the team. This is barring injury. Kevin White is on the squad. Cameron Meredith is on the squad. Those are guarantees. And then after that is they signed Kendall Wright. They signed Marcus Wheaton. You probably figure both of those guys are going to make it. You have Josh Bellamy. I know as wide receiver goes, not that good, but he was a very, very good special teams player for the Bears. They're not going to get rid of him because Victor Cruz doesn't play special teams. And
no, he doesn't.
You need those bottom 2 wide receivers to play special teams. So Josh Bellamy's going to probably make it as a special teamer. And Deontay Thompson probably makes it as a kick returner, punt returner kind of guy, and a special teamer. So right there, that's 6 guys. So who does Victor Cruz beat out? I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch, but my prediction right now is Victor Cruz ends up sitting at home on his couch, at some point, because he's not going to be a Chicago Bear, I don't think, for this season.
I have a hunch he will make the team, but it's just kind of a question of how much will he play and what will he do. I mean, he is a proven guy, but people were kind of getting mad at me for saying, but he's a Pro Bowler, he's won a Super Bowl, how could you be so low on him? He's only 30. He's very injury prone the past few years. He's not what he used to be. And, keep in mind that it's a rebuilding year, and you sign him to a 1-year deal. That goes to show where his value is. He was basically visiting a number of teams to sign a 1-year deal. If he was who he was a few years ago, he'd be getting more than like a 1-year deal minimum contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think his role here is as a veteran presence insurance policy.
That's really all I see him as.
If Kevin White gets hurt in training camp, then they've got a sixth guy in there that knows how to run routes, that knows how to play in the NFL and has done it at a high level, even if he's older and injury prone. And if anybody else gets hurt or people just don't live up to the expectations, like i.e. Wheaton or Wright, then he could fill in one of those spots. But if all goes as planned, I think he was a security blanket or an insurance policy, and nothing more than that.
Right. Yeah. It's not an all-star put over the top move. It's just not.
No. And so I don't know. I think this is going to be a very fun training camp to watch, because you're going to see. I think the Bears' new philosophy is that they're going to add as much top tier talent as they can, and then just churn the bottom of that roster until they find guys that catch on. And if a guy is not, whereas previous years we saw a lot of guys just hang around the team for a long time just because they knew the Bears system and the Bears had him under contract. And I think this regime is very much so going to say, listen, if you're not up to snuff, we're going to turn over the bottom of that roster until we find people that can play well and fit in and challenge for starting spots.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot to be determined, and it's going to be interesting to see how they work things out.
But I don't really have anything else. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Alex?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Real good show.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure to check us out on social media, Twitter at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Subscribe on however you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Share with your friends. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.